Welcome to the Will and Dave Show, where we talk about hard things, whether it's comfortable or not. We think those conversations are necessary and important. We think that having different opinions is crucial to a healthy discourse. So saddle up, enjoy the fireside chat.
You know, every time we use that intro, I feel like I owe it to that intro to have like a little bitty, like little fake fire behind me or something. Because we're like, I mean, yeah, we might be embodying the spirit of a fireside chat, but there is no fire to chat beside.
Yes.
I feel a little bit disingenuous about that.
Well, William, how was your week?
My week was pretty good, minus catching a sinus infection. But other than that,
Well, that means you
could be
can do
worse.
this Sam Elliott voice for reals.
Totally.
You don't have to fake it. Fake it till you
Yeah.
make it. Isn't that what they all say? Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, but is that really good advice?
I don't know.
Sometimes.
I don't know. I'm not going to go there.
That's too deep for tonight.
Like to let you guys know we'll get this stuff out of the way early. If you want to support the show, you can support us at buymeacoffee.com/Will and Dave Show. That's my Sam Elliott voice for the day.
Nice.
Yes. And
We'd also like to thank our sponsors for tonight.
right, one of whom is going to be joining us because he was also a sponsor of a trip to Ottawa. So
Yes, he was. We'll let him deal with that when the time comes. But
he's a generous
our
guy.
other,
What can we say?
yeah, our longest sponsor for the show is Stitched by Susan.
Yes.
And the Stitched by Susan podcast, Measure Twice, Cut Once, as well as all of her other social media platforms. Stitched by Susan is Stitched by Susan is her brand. Susan, is a wonderful lady who touches on almost every aspect of quilting in some way or other, whether it be live streams, courses, patterns, you name it. She has something or some information for pretty much anyone. So if you have an interest in quilting or are getting an interest in quilting, we highly recommend checking out stitchedbysusan.com. She's also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
On everything.
Yeah, anywhere fine podcasts are found as well.
So now that hard stuff's out of the way, William, how was your week? What'd you do?
It was okay.
You're working
But,
lots?
not lots, but we were working the right amount.
So I want to
had a full week of work.
say I don't like you a whole lot right now because you are visiting my grandson and my granddaughter, and I am not because I'm like 1,000 miles away, and that really.
It only took me about 6 months, but she finally lets me pick her up now from time to time.
Frosts my cookies.
The little guy, anyone can pick up the little guy. He's the happiest baby I've ever seen in my life.
Well, I've heard that not anybody can pick up the little guy because he weighs almost as much as I do.
Oh yeah, no, he is a little chunk.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm not down.
He's a chungus. No, my new favorite game with Kendra, because no shade to Chad, but Chad can't do it. But my favorite game with her is I'll pick her up upside down by her hips, and I can put her feet on the ceiling, and she can walk on the ceiling, and she thinks it's the funniest thing in the world.
I was wondering, what the heck are you able to do with her that Chad can't? And now I know, reach the ceiling.
Reach the ceiling. So yeah, it's been great. And
that's
my
awesome.
brother Alex was here last week, and seeing him with her was just wonderful. Warms my heart.
That's good. Well, we're going to get back a few weeks with the Ottawa convoy, the Freedom Convoy. And this evening, we have some awesome guests on the show. And we're going to begin with Mallory Smith, who is a sponsor of the show, except he also is one who was a sponsor of the Freedom movement a little bit indirectly. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Mallory.
Hey, how are you guys?
We're doing good.
Good.
So you came home from the hockey game in a hurry, got to catch the Will and Dave show and be a guest on the show.
I did. The Huskies lost 5-1 to Grand Prairie. This is game 3 of the finals, and but the officials did a good job, so I'm happy.
Of course you would say that. You is one.
I are one.
Throw him under the bus. Come on, man. Throw him under the bus.
No, it won't happen.
So we know how you supported I know how you supported the Freedom Convoy, but for those who don't know, do you want to explain to us how you supported the convoy?
Well, primarily it was just one participant that came from our neck of the woods that wanted to go down there, be a part of what was happening there, and was looking for some help, some assistance, and there was something that we could do by, what we do. Will, as you know, what we do is build trusses, and we were able to give him something to help him on his way. And any other support we did would have been just, personal to him, primarily. But even though I know this gentleman, it was the concept behind it that I was really supporting. So I was happy to be a part in that little way to make it easier for him to be a part of it, which is something he was passionate about.
Right, because he wanted he was taking a large truck down there, like a semi truck, and he wanted large signs on the back on the trailer of his truck, right? And we built the rig for those signs, essentially.
That's correct. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
No, that's okay.
That's what we did. Yeah.
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 So why? So with all the hubbub in Ottawa over this, as one who sort of gave through goods and services and not in money, was there any fear on your part of reprisals out of the government or even from local businesses for supporting it?
I don't think so, because what we found, we had no idea that what the protest or the Freedom Convoy, what the reaction by the government would be. And
Right.
so when they came to us, we were more than happy to help out in any way we could, whether it be financially or with services or goods or something like that. It wasn't until later where we found out that there could be consequences for doing it. We had no idea that would be the case at the time that we were apart.
When we built that rig, that was the initial weekend that everyone was, or the week they were driving up there for the weekend.
That's right.
So that was the very start of it all.
Yeah.
So were you worried at all as you were hearing what was happening, or was there any worry on your part for reprisals?
No. I thought about it for sure, but I wasn't concerned because, again, being services and as opposed to a financial commitment, and even anything that we helped out with would have been personal. It wasn't through a platform of giving that may have been impacted or identified.
Oh, but come on, Mallory. You didn't go and give money to Give, Send, Go?
No, I didn't. Or to GoFundMe or either of them. Yeah.
I feel like it's worth pointing out, and I don't know if I've talked much about this in the podcast, but there's also been a pretty stalwart grassroots movement here in this community, and I would imagine in other similar communities where local business owners have come together to basically say, hey, we're going to band together, we're going to attach our names to this convoy to an extent, and we'll have each other's backs. So if anything does come of it, if there ever is a negative consequence, you're part of a community that can help support you if that happens.
Yeah.
And I personally went to a meeting, not directly as a representative of your company, Mallory, but just to see, and we brought all the information back to you. So there's a certain level of comfort, I think, or I assume, that could be taken as a business owner when you're in a community that has your back like that, or at least a significant part of a community that has your back like that.
That's a good point, Will. I don't know if it's so much that there's a community that has my back, or we comprise part of the community that had the backs of these people who, like Bern is and you'll get to meet him. I understand he'll be on later, but Bern is a remarkable man. He's a man of principle. He's a man of conviction, and he showed that to us. And I could get behind that. Now, I didn't just do it because he was a friend or an acquaintance. I did it because as he shared his passion about what was happening, I thought this is something I could support. And that was the reason behind it. So I wanted to be behind him, not so much that there was people behind us. If you understand, if I said that correctly.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah. But I mean, really, Will, I mean, you built the parts. I mean, I was just willing to do it, but you guys are guilty by association, or
I've probably said things in this podcast that are way more incriminating than anything that we built for Bern's truck.
So I do want to say, Mallory, or William, actually, this is for Will, is you probably have lost a few friends now that they know that you built the trusses for a Freedom Convoy guy.
To be perfectly honest with you,
yes,
the friends that I've told about it, I mean, I don't go around advertising. Guess what I did, guys? I built something for the Freedom Convoy. But people I've talked to, they get a good chuckle out of it.
This progressive guy.
Yeah, well, they know that I don't necessarily support what they're protesting, but I support their right to protest. And if they came to our business and they wanted a thing built for their protest, I don't mind building it. And it just so happens that Mallory did it to support that, and that's perfectly all right to me as well. It's no skin off my nose. I'll build it regardless. I'm not so lost in the mires of my own moral indignity that I can't build that.
Oh, that's a lot of big words all in one sentence.
Yeah,
Holy
yeah.
cow.
I'm not sure I use the right ones. I'm not sure that I'm quite so stuck up that I would be like, not gonna build it.
That
until the other
sounds-
guys think they can build it.
I think you understand the value of a paycheck. That's what it boils down to.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hey,
but I mean,
listen,
even if the paycheck wasn't attached, I have no beef with building.
No. Seriously, I was talking to my daughter who lives in Connecticut, and she was following the whole convoy and had actually thought of going up to, not to participate, but to witness it. But things transpired where it was over before she had a chance to do that. But even among her and her colleagues that she works with, they were following this, and it's just like you, Will. It wasn't about the issues; it was about the right to protest. It was someone who had conviction to say, "This is what I believe in, and I want to make my feelings known."
Exactly.
And because they did that, and like I was surprised, but there was a lot of people in New Haven, Connecticut, following this because of our involvement. That's cool.
Now that it's kind of in the back mirror to a certain extent, I mean, its effects are still being felt, but the actual event is kind of behind us. We can look back at this, and me personally, even though again I don't agree with the protest's intended purpose, I love how much of an exemplar of a good protest, like a good peaceful protest, this was. There were very few actual ugly incidents and ugly people that showed up, and the ones that were quickly ushered away. And yeah, the press blew it out of proportion, but overall, the end result was not so bad for such a big event. There was very minimal fallout.
Imagine if this had happened in Portland.
Exactly.
Oh, it would have been an absolute riot, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I joked with your guest later. I joked with him saying, "Oh, come on, you want to drive out to Ottawa and make some demands? I mean, let me tell you how we real Americans, how we protest." I joked about it because we do it differently. But I was reading this morning about the concerns of so many people who were there in Ottawa, and I mean Ottawa residents, who really they don't support the fact that this was without impact, without disturbance.
Oh, there was disturbance.
But I don't mean just social, but just the things weren't as good as what people said, and I'm surprised to hear that, because I've talked to people who have been there, and I've asked them very point blank, "You put that many people together, and you're telling me you didn't have?" There must have been.
Oh, absolutely. I just mean that relative to what we see in terms of large scale protests in this day and age.
Oh, for sure.
This is like in the top percentile, I think. Like, obviously, a protest has to be disruptive to be functional. Like, it has to disrupt something. And so, residents are going to deal with the noise, they're going to deal with the garbage and other aspects of it. But that's what makes a protest effective, is that it is a thorn in people's side. People in the town put pressure on the government and so on. That's what makes it work.
It was just surprising to see the reaction of leadership in our country, how they decided to respond and react to what was there, because this could have played out so differently.
It really could have,
but it didn't, and I'm sure you hear about that from Bern.
It's kind of disheartening now that we're getting to a point like here in BC where a lot of the health mandates are being rescinded or lifted, or at least alleviated. Like, masks are no longer required in most public places. The vaccine passport is going the way of the dodo bird very quickly. Most restrictions are getting lifted, and there's no you can't tell me that this protest didn't play a part in all these provincial governments looking at the system and being like, okay, we have to let up somewhere or people are just going to keep getting pissed. So obviously the protest did something. It shined a spotlight on just how aggravated the average person is with the current health orders. But the government can't admit that the protest was even remotely effective, because that would. So they're sitting back and they're changing things, and provinces are changing things, and the federal government that warned that they better not change things is totally letting them do it because they realize that it's probably the right thing to do.
Right.
But they're never
Right.
going to admit that the protest played a part in that. And they couldn't if they had just talked to people, they probably could have reached the same decision, but with a whole lot more good press.
Will, there was a fella who had years ago had a little dog on the farm, and it was a straggly little poodle-looking thing, and his name was Harriet. And what they did is they talked about Harriet being this great bear dog, and it was anything but a bear dog. And so whenever he would say this, because he used it as just sort of as a joke, and someone would say, come on, Bill, really? Your dog's a bear dog? And he said, well, have you seen a bear around? and you think, oh, yeah. And really, when I look at what happened, there was a lot of things happened, and we can't draw a direct connection. You're trying to make one, and I agree that I think it contributed to something that was just long waited. But what this protest did, and I don't think it did it entirely or intentionally, and I'm interested to see how Bern feels about this. This exposed other things that were probably more concerning than just an issue of mandates or vax passes or lack of freedoms. Like this exposed something within our leadership, in our country, that was very concerning. And I think that stunned everyone. It certainly did me, because we went from a fringe minority with unacceptable views to an Emergencies Act in a matter of days. 14 days, 10 days, and whether it was right or not, it couldn't be argued. But so did it change mandates? Yeah, it sure things changed, but it certainly had other
absolutely
very obvious what do you call it? Go ahead.
I do think that even for me in progressive circles, a lot of people kind of had their eyes opened to just how crappy of a leader Trudeau is /was /can be. Like, I don't know of a lot of people that still like Trudeau. Even the most progressive people don't really love him. But this whole incident has kind of put the final nail in the coffin that he's not a great leader. At the best I've heard of him lately is that at least he's not the Conservative Party. That's the closest I've ever heard to a compliment leveled at Justin Trudeau in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And it's been amplified and magnified by this whole situation.
But I think it even goes deeper than that. I mean, he's really a leader of a party, but he's a leader of a government that made decisions. He didn't himself make all of these decisions.
Oh, absolutely,
and so we can identify him, and he has to, as the leader. That goes through the territory. But in fact, what we saw was something that, and I'm sure Bern will talk about this. What we saw was Canadians, fellow Canadians, who just were just saying enough is enough. We're tired. We're hurting. We're angry. We're sad. We're bereaving.
Right.
We're lonely. And all they were saying that, and the support of Canadians as this convoy traversed the country from West Coast right to Ottawa, and then the East Coast that came and joined them. We saw a grassroots movement that showed the solidarity of Canadians. And that's just something that you can't ignore. You can't ignore it. But they did. They tried
to.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say it. I'm sure when Burns and the thing is, I admire conviction. It's not we can debate the cause, but what we can't debate is the conviction and the passion that someone will sacrificially stand up for something they believe in, just like you guys do in this show. It may be differing views, but you stand up and discuss them. And I really wish that what you guys provide an example of dialogue from differing views. I wish we would have done that in this case, because had the dissenting view of the convoy came out and just talked about it, I think it would have had a different outcome.
Hey, Will, I think we're going to have to pay the sponsor for that plug.
Let's say Will and Dave 2024. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's in listening to the news or the YouTube, the real reporters of the convoy in Ottawa. I spent a lot of time on YouTube on the live streams, and it's fascinating the range of people who agreed with it. It was not all young people. It was not all rednecks. It was a wide swath of society who gave of their time and their money. I think of the cost of driving a semi from Fort St. John out to Ottawa. It's not a small investment.
No.
It's huge, actually.
Let me put my metaphorical tinfoil hat on. Maybe that's why fuel prices are skyrocketing, is to disincentivize people from doing it again. Just make it too expensive.
Take your hat off, Will.
Okay.
I just was reading an article this afternoon, and they are doing another one from Ontario out to Vancouver, and it's starting tomorrow, I believe. And it is not as large, although the point is the same. They want to crisscross the country and say we want our freedoms back, and it's not a big ask. I don't think it's not a big ask, And again,
well, may I respond to that?
Yeah.
No. Go for it.
Yeah. Being that I'm a sponsor, I have an exemption. No, but sincerely, I think this has made all of us relook at what does protest mean and what does it look like, and how can we have a dissenting voice or even dialogue in public so that we can, if you have dialogue, it removes the necessity of protest. But protest usually happens when there is no dialogue, when it's just one-sided. And I look at these, and again, we'll listen to Bern and some of the thing that moved him forward into joining this. But now as we look forward, I mean, provinces are open, masks are off, vax passes are becoming extinct, like you said earlier, Will. And so you think, what was really identified that we're wanting to protest now? Is it freedom of speech, freedom of movement? Is it the fact that we still can't travel without vax passes right now? I'm just curious, because it just seems like I would certainly not support everyone just protesting everything just because it gets headlines or it gets notoriety.
Yeah, I feel like this protest, or for a protest to gain traction, it isn't just for the people to show up boots on the ground. It's also for them to garner. It requires getting at least some level of support out of the general community or country, depending on how big of a protest you're dealing with. So you might find 100 people that want to protest XYZ random thing, but if they can't also generate a lot of interest in the broader world, it'll fall apart really quickly. Whereas something like this, that's exactly what it is. I mean, the actual protest was only in the hundreds, maybe into the low thousands at its peak. people that were actively engaged in it, but the broad reach across the country was massive. Like it was national news for weeks.
Yeah.
It dominated the news cycle.
Yeah.
So I feel like you could start a protest about anything, but it's going to be a waste of your time unless you're doing it for something that'll strike a chord.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, William. It's a small world when you look at who I played hockey with, 18 or 20 or 30 years ago, and they now are part of a political movement in Canada that is huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's on you and I right now, as Mallory had to step away for a minute. But it's something in society, I think it's looking for answers, for freedoms, for truth, for leadership who actually leads. And they're not finding it. And I wonder at times if the reaching for freedoms is actually indicative of a larger hole in people as a culture.
Maybe.
And
I don't
is it too
know.
deep for the Will and Dave show? Is that getting into uncharted waters? Maybe we should talk about beer and hot dogs and sauerkraut or something.
Sauerkraut is disgusting, but
I don't love you anymore.
Unless it's in a Reuben, I don't really have any use for it whatsoever. Or chocolate cake. It's good in chocolate cake.
What?
Yeah, sauerkraut and chocolate cake. Absolutely. You don't taste it at all. You don't get any of the vinegary taste. That gets cooked away, and all it is just makes for a very moist cake. It's like adding carrots to cake. It has a very similar effect with a little bit of acidity.
Oh my God, William!
Anywho,
I used to like you. I don't like you. So Bern just joined the show in the green room. So I'm going to play the clip. Well, I tried to wrap my head around sauerkraut and chocolate cake. How in God's name we got to that?
You just ask Susan about it. She'll probably back me up.
I'm going to have to cleanse my palate tonight. So I'm going to play the Bern clip, and then we'll all come back on.
Okay.
So crime was down 91% in the downtown Ottawa core. Incredible. But police reports and politicians were saying the protest was becoming increasingly dangerous. There was the restaurant that had the window broken, and that was all over the news. But then if you looked into it further, the restaurant owner was like, no, I've had over 80 truckers offer to pay for their broken window, and it gets broken all the time, and the truckers are awesome. So, I mean, the truckers were out there shoveling snow, they were picking up trash, they were taking care of people. I mean, how did you feel with the government, police, and media reports all pushing this narrative that it was dangerous? Did you guys have a plan to kind of counter that?
We just kept getting encouraged to, first of all, be careful who you're granting interviews to, right? We know that there's a lot of media that'll spin things, and that happened so much, and we saw starkly how much it happened because we were there, we were seeing what was going on, and yet more often than not, it was somebody from home calling and saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing, or is this actually going on? And so we put out a lot of fires and say, no, that's not what's happening. And then just kept getting encouraged, and we did it in our group, just keep posts going out. We have to keep flooding social media with what we're seeing and what we're witnessing, and keep it going to people that trust us and people that know who we are. Surely they can believe what we're saying and what we're seeing. And so much as I hate social media, I had gotten to the point prior to going where I was done with Facebook. I was getting so upset with the way people were talking to each other and how divisive it was getting, and the things that people were saying was just so over the top. I'm like, I can't deal with this anymore. And yet, so that ended up being my platform though, because I'm old and I don't really want to get into a bunch of different platforms. So Facebook was it. And I think so much of this war is a big word, but so much of this information war needed to be won by us putting it out there and people just resharing and resharing and resharing and counteracting all the crap that was out there on legacy media.
At one point, I think maybe 2 weeks in, I kind of asked myself, well, should I go home now? There's a couple going home from Ottawa there, and I called my wife. What do you think? And she said, you know what, we miss you terribly, but I don't think you can go home. There's so many people relying on this real news, this first-hand experience, and they're watching the news and they don't see it connect, right? It doesn't align, and it just that decided it for me. I had to stay.
Hey, why don't we welcome Mallory and Bern, and Mallory now can keep quiet and we'll listen to Bern talk because, we don't want to listen to Mallory anymore. But the thing with Mallory, at least he doesn't eat sauerkraut and chocolate cake.
Jesus Christ. I'm sure someday you let that go. But we also can't hear Mallory.
He can now.
We can now?
I had muted him because I didn't want him to talk anymore. Hey, Bern, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, guys, how you doing?
We were talking before while the video was on. I used to play hockey either with or against you in Hudson Hope.
Yeah, among other places. Didn't you used to do some reffing as well, right?
Not that I'll admit to.
Okay. You're careful in what company you admit to that, right?
There's actually a church hockey tournament, and Mallory and I were reffing the finals, and we came out in sunglasses and used hockey sticks as blind men sticks to walk out on the ice.
I remember that. Oh,
Yes.
man. Another time.
So I just want to acknowledge Richie Weeb is in the audience tonight, and I can't believe we got him to watch the Will and Dave show.
We're really reaching out and touching new audiences.
We are.
Hey, Richie, how you doing?
He's agreeing with Michelle, which he probably will never agree with ever again, but that's okay.
Look at us go, bringing people together. Look at us.
So let's get into your story, Bern. I played a bit of the clip of your interview here last weekend. I believe in Charlie Lake. Mm-hmm. It's a big story for you to go out east and get to drive out for. That's a long drive, over 50 hours, if I remember correctly, or 60 hours.
Well, especially if you're in convoy, right?
Yeah.
It takes 60 hours to get there for sure.
Right, yeah. It's a big thing. So, why?
Why indeed? I guess it started with your mindset as to what was going on in our world, right?
Right.
But then just a really good friend of mine, who shall remain nameless, his name's Jeff. He and I work together, and we spend, especially when you work a night shift, sometimes you spend a lot of time on the phone or on the radio, just keeping each other awake. And what's top of mind these days is the state of our world and COVID and all things COVID related, right? And so we did a lot of talking, and I was really tired of talking about it and looking for solutions, looking for something, anything that could be done to see changes. It was almost as naive as that. It was, he sent this clip or a flyer brochure, I guess, of the Freedom Convoy to me. And I'm like, hey, I know how to drive a truck. That is something I can do. Mm-hmm. And I agreed with the premise. I agreed with why they were doing what they were doing. And I was excited to just do something.
Huge risk.
That's about as simple as it got.
Huge risk, though, in going out. I mean, A, it's expensive. It's hours away from work. You're a working man, so I mean, mm-hmm. if you're away for a week or for 3 weeks, it costs you money to do that. It's a big risk, and for those of us who, it was easy, for Will and I to say, yeah, we support it, or or I support it, and William would grudgingly agree with the right to protest. We'll put it that way. But
Say begrudgingly, but okay.
it's harder for those of you who said, I'm going to walk away from a lot of money, and I'm going to go and I'm gonna risk a lot. Arrest, they impounded your truck. There's a lot of risk get placed there. And it was really amazing at our end and at looking at it. And again, looking and saying, I know this guy who did this, who risked almost everything, really. It really is inspiring for us. What was it like on the ground?
Well, would I have gone if I would have known my truck was going to be impounded? I guess that's a question that I can't really answer because I didn't at that point. It was fairly, Andy and I talked about it. Andy was a fellow that came with me, and I think you've talked about having him on at a later date. So it was, I guess, pretty naive. I really thought I'd be home within 3 weeks. Google lied to me when I looked up how far it was to Ottawa, and pegged it at 3,300 kilometers. So I drove 2,000 kilometers to the Ontario border and realized I still had over 2,000 to go.
Yeah.
But it's like so many things in life, right? Like a lot of times, if we knew what it would all entail, we might never embark on it. But sometimes it just takes putting your foot out there and just getting going and deal with what comes up as it comes up.
Very pragmatic way of looking at it.
Well, that's kind of me. I'm all about pragmatism, what works and what doesn't.
There you go. So the other thing that really intrigued me, and because I'm sure you've been asked whether by other people that you've talked to, both in publications and in interviews and whatnot, there's lots to ask about the actual event while you were in Ottawa. But the part that really gets my interest is when you come back from something like that. Like, I only saw snippets of it in town here, but it was an event when you guys got back to town, like returning heroes. Like, that's got to be a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in, and I'm really uncomfortable with that term, honestly. My wife likes to tell people that I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of you, right? So that term, there's people that deserve that term. I'm not one of them, but I was in a position where I was able to take some action, and a lot of people, I guess, look up to me for doing it. I'm glad they followed and supported me. Mallory's a great example of somebody that supported me. The fellows down there at Northern Trust were just fantastic. Being able to help out the way they did. And it was on a personal level. I don't need to be naming anything. So that term does make me a little bit uncomfortable because I realize how little I really did and how naive I was in stepping out to do it. I didn't. Right. At that point, and I mean, it was always meant to be legal. It was always meant to be above board within our rights to protest. And so in my mind, when I left, what I was risking, what I was giving up was those weeks of work. And yeah, I got to tell you, my family was so 110% on board the minute I mentioned it. Once I mentioned it, I almost couldn't not go.
Right. And so what happens now that the protest is over, but obviously, I mean, your truck was still impounded. That's still going to have some lasting ramifications. And now that you have something of I don't want to say a platform, but there are people listening to you, do you intend to do anything with it? Or is it just going to be back to work, back to life as normal?
Well, that's a big question, Will, right? And, we had about a week of sitting around in Ottawa where we were a little bit on pins and needles as to whether we'd get our equipment back. Right. So a lot of time for contemplation. The city's pretty locked down at this point, so there's not really that much we could do, even if we wanted to go protest on foot or whatever. Right. A lot of time for contemplation. A lot of time sitting around with these fellas that I've come to love dearly. That I was parked beside for 3-4 weeks. 3 weeks, I guess, until we got arrested, and then beyond that. and then the drive home, and then now I've had a week at home contemplating that very same question. And I'm a man of faith. I believe God has a direction for me. God has a place for me, and all things happen for a reason. And so now I want to be faithful to any platform that I do have.
Right.
If that can be used for the betterment of my community, be used for the betterment of Canada, as a whole.
All right. I'll just, my comment is an echo of what Drew Swan's just stated there. That's a very pragmatic and very humble response to it. And other people can admire what they want about what you did with the protests and everything, but I like that response. You've got something, you're not going to squander it, but you're just taking it as it comes.
I think there'd be a few individuals that maybe that would differ from that. Nobody. When I say nobody, I mean I don't know the hearts and intents of everybody that went.
Right.
But people didn't go seeking something for themselves. They're
Mm-hmm.
seeking something for our nation, right? So I guess maybe that's why it's really humbling, recognizing how many awesome people went, how many awesome people were involved. But way beyond that, like I met so many amazing people across the provinces, right from BC all the way to Ottawa. People that would have loved to be in our shoes, but for one reason or another couldn't. I feel honored to have been in a position to just be able to go. And what I experienced and what I saw, and how my life's been changed because of it, is amazing.
It's really interesting for me when I watch this and I look at the people who supported this convoy going out east, the Hutterites and the Mennonites, and again, the people who usually are not involved in anything political at any level. If they vote, it's incredible. I don't even know that they do vote. If you ask the Hutterites, I don't know that they are active in politics. And yet, all the coverage of them who followed you all for 400 miles or 300 miles to give you food. Absolutely amazing. As a nation, as a culture and society, it was a huge amount of people who said, I want to get in behind this in somewhere. It's just amazing to us.
It was a stellar example of community spirit, and not community as in like a physical single location, but as a people.
Yeah.
Right.
As a nation.
I'm sitting here wondering if I should wait and let David put his foot in his mouth, because it sounds like he doesn't realize I'm Mennonite. he probably does, but I should have just sat back and waited.
I'm half Mennonite, so.
No, it's all good. Actually, I found that really surprising. The block that we parked on, and just the way it worked out, the block that we parked on, over half of us were Mennonites.
That's
and
awesome.
It's right back to what you said. Like, we have always been known as people who withdrew from society to some degree. Mm-hmm. We'd find a lot of times they were good farmers. They would usually find themselves some good land, kind of often removed from a city some distance, and go about your business. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a large part why the Hutterites are so enthusiastic about this too, because they are people that don't care for government overreach. They like to be left alone and like to be able to live their lives the way they choose to. But I continually found it amazing and fascinating that, and it wasn't a conflict, it wasn't, but at the same time, it was something. And here we're normally, how do you say the word, reticent,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mennonites on the front lines of this thing that was going on in Ottawa. And I just found it fascinating the whole time. And I also loved being with my people.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to argue. Hold on, Will. I'm going to argue with Richie just a little bit, because I've been on the ice with Mennonites, and they do not withdraw from confrontation. Sorry, that's not true. Mallory has put more than one Mennonite in the penalty box.
It was off me, I think.
I have to wonder how much of it was Mennonites and Hutterites getting involved in it because they wanted to stand up for something they saw as bigger or politically based, and how much of it was them just seeing a big group of people especially a group of people who they'll have connections to, familial connections, seeing them crossing the country and seeing them hungry and being like, oh, hey, hungry folks, let's feed them. Because that's just the kind of people they are. If I've ever known anything about Mennonites, it's that they feed people, both in a literal and a metaphorical sense. They like to feed their communities. They really, really do.
So just a pragmatic approach.
Again, yeah, a very pragmatic approach. I'm sure some of them do have political reasons for wanting to do it, and more ideological ones. But I would suspect that a good part of it was just they saw hungry people.
Can I break in here?
Absolutely.
Yes, Mallory.
I'm going to have to, when we're all done, I have to go look up what the word pragmatic means. You guys are using it so much. But let me tell you, I was not pragmatic in my support of what Bern wanted to do when he came to talk to us. It was very, he articulated a vision, a passion, and because of that, I wanted to be a part in supporting what he wanted to do, and he represented others who were willing to sacrificially stand up for the rest of us who maybe not willing to do it. So I appreciate the pragmatism and all that, but that wasn't the case. This was, Bern, you're a good man, and I knew that, and that's why I could get behind you. And that's I'm listening to your telling your story, and I'm actually humbled by the way you're expressing it, and I appreciate that very much, bro.
Well, I do appreciate that. And to address Will's talk about feeding, so in our group, I was the only guy from as far west as British Columbia, and the other Mennonites were all from Manitoba, and and these guys do haul. So there's 4 fellas from Manitoba that were Mennonites as well, 5, and they do they haul cross border truck, like that's their business. 70% of their business is cross border. So the initial reason for the whole convoy directly affected their way of life and their day to day. For myself, it didn't, and people found that surprising. My work hadn't been affected.
It was directly ideological then,
I guess, right? My work up here hadn't been affected. I could go to work as much or more than I wanted a lot of times, but it was just, I guess, an ability to put myself in some other people's shoes and see that there's a lot of people being directly affected by these mandates, especially the cross-border mandate.
It was interesting in looking for artwork for the show, and everything in the online is all about first impressions, and I was looking for a picture of Justin to put on the thumbnail, and the best one I could come up with is him all worried, that hand on his forehead. And I look at the result of all this, and it looks as though the mandates are ending, and at least at the provincial level, hopefully at the federal level soon. Here in the U.S., it's almost all open everywhere except for the federal level. Hopefully, I think all of us are saying that hopefully it will end at the federal level as well. Although it's hard for government to acknowledge that you guys had anything to do with it. So it may take a little bit longer as they want to put some distance, but it's
I like to think that the protests had an effect. I don't see something being that big of a national story for that long not having an effect. They won't ever directly credit the government won't credit the protest with being a driving force in the changes to the mandates, but I can't help but think that they are at least a very large factor in it, in just showing honestly how upset Canadians were with the way things were being handled.
I don't care who they give the credit to when it comes right down to it, right? We just want our life back to normal. I mean, I'm more comfortable with that, honestly. And they can save face however they want to. It is, you touched into that. It is some serious backtracking if they need to start changing the narrative. It's swallowing some humble pie, but let's hope that this sticks around. It was hard coming across the country, to tell you the truth. Across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, where mandates had been lifting, and by the time I got home, we still had mask mandates. We still had the passport mandate here in British Columbia, it was hard coming home in that respect.
It is interesting that I look at BC. It's hard to understand why the difference at that Alberta border, where the science changes. It gets hard to understand that. It doesn't make sense for those of us who look at it logically, but
it's the Rockies, David. You should know that. Like, the virus doesn't
Can't
cross
make it
the higher
around.
altitudes.
We can't make it through the Pine Pass, Dave. Jeez.
Well,
Doesn't
Alberta
have
and
trucks.
but Alberta and you guys, it's still flat. Between you and Grand Prairie, it's still flat. I know the roads there. It doesn't work. So no, I still hold that the governments are idiots, but that's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
But think about it, though. We looked at, and like I said earlier, before Bern was on, we may have tried to create a connection between what happened in Ottawa and the mandate starting to change. But one thing that very clearly happened as a result of the gathering in the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa was to watch the response of our government. And I don't think anyone expected that. Bern, I don't know if you spoke about it or not, but I mean, I certainly, and I'm sure many Canadians were horrified by the response or the reaction of the government to what, for all intents and purposes, was a peaceful protest. And even though we were expecting maybe a change in mandates or someone to come out and give us some dialogue about it, instead, what we experienced, you front hand, experienced this authoritarian arrogance. And I hope I'm not being too strong, but that's how it appeared.
It
And I don't think that was your
an
intent.
authoritarian gesture.
That
The government's gesture.
yeah, if we could have gone back to that, that would have really separated heroes from the ordinary people that went. If we would have known what it would turn into and still gone, and that's a big question that thankfully we never have to answer because we can't see that far ahead. But so Friday morning was when I was arrested along with my fellows there on Nicholas Street, and Saturday morning is when things started getting ugly, and you were so close to that action and yet removed from it. We weren't at that point. We were still trying to get our bearings and find a place to stay, and because our trucks had been towed and that was where most of us were living. It was the most sickening feeling to watch footage of what was happening to our fellow citizens, to innocent protesters, unarmed people, and the way they were being brutalized. It honestly left you wanting to puke. Like, it's hard to describe what that felt like, but I don't want to experience that feeling again.
You were arrested. Is there any issues now? Is it on your record? Were charges, are they open still? Are they all dropped? What's the end game of that part of this saga?
So there's still towards the end of March, I have a court date. Okay. So anybody that was arrested has pending charges. I'll basically leave it at that because it's still ongoing.
Gotcha. Well, this is a story which is going to last a while. And again, I don't want. We've been on about half hour now. I think we should wrap this up. It really is a sobering moment in the history of Canada. And the fact that we know a person who was, what's the word I want? Arrested, I guess, as good as anything, for saying, hey, I want my freedom back. It really ought to wake people up. It really should. And I just wondered if you and Mallory, so in the light of the rearview mirror, what's your one takeaway of this event?
For myself, and I had to wrestle through this when we're sitting waiting for our trucks, it was really discouraging what I saw in Ottawa. Not just the depth of corruption in government that we saw and just this unwarranted use of the Emergencies Act. The the way police acted with unreasonable force was really discouraging. Seeing how untrustworthy our mainstream media is was discouraging. But the further I kept coming home and back to these communities that all of us came from, the more excited I got, because I'd been seeing fantastic things happening among people, people being united again, people loving each other. That initial 2 weeks in Ottawa, and the way Canadians just wanted to talk to each other and hear each other out and didn't care about race, religion, skin color, any of those things didn't matter. It was the most amazing feeling of patriotism that I've ever experienced, and it gave me excitement for what we can be. And so I actually believe that some of those ugly things had to happen for more people to wake up. And if we can come out of this realizing again that we as people have a voice, that we don't just need to let our lives be dictated to us by government who theoretically works for us. We just don't get the luxury of just sitting on our butts and collecting services. We have to be involved. We have to use those voices that we have. We need to let our elected representatives know who they're representing and what the views of those people are. We can't just assume that they're going to figure it out as they go. We have to know what bills are being introduced and what bills they're trying to pass. If we want to have a hand in our country, then we need to make our voice heard.
And you, Mallory, what's your takeaway?
My takeaway, because I didn't experience what Bern did, but what I did experience and visualize, I followed Bern the whole way across, the whole time he was there. And then as he traveled back, I followed what he was doing. And I know that he represented a group of Canadians that stood up for something. And I'm humbled by a level of conviction, a level of passion that sacrificially these men and women stood up. And they stood up for you, and they stood up for me, and they stood up for Will. And when I saw the demonstration of support that was so overwhelming, I've seen it bring tears to the eyes of these guys as they talk about it. And I realize I do live in a great country. I do live with great citizens. And this community is strong and is vibrant. It just needs to learn where its voice is. And we got a chance to see that. And I don't want to embarrass you, Bern, but I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've done. I'm proud to have been a part of it. Because it's so important, and it was so necessary, and it continues to be, just like you said. So my takeaway is I went down to the arena today because the only reason I go to see the game, and the boys, they asked me to sing the anthem at every game, and I love that line, and I sing it with as much passion as I can. God keep our land glorious and free, and I try to emphasize that when I sing it. And these fellas, young and old men and women who did this, they personified that, keeping our land and keeping it free.
Amen.
Yep. On that note, William, you are muted, William. And so I couldn't hear a word you said.
What a wonderful note to end the show on.
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot I had myself muted.
I agree. And if you will wrap us up, Will, I think we're just going to end on that note.
I just want to say a final thank you, both you guys, for being on the show. Thank you for coming along, and thank you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts. We do greatly appreciate it.
Thanks,
and
guys.
for all you guys watching, stay safe, don't die, and have a great night.